If we think about the United Nations, a lot of people think about human rights. What I think about is the United Nations was created in San Francisco in 1945. If you think about how the world looked like in 1945, it was largely colonized, if not all. It was a small selective group of countries who created the UN, and it expanded over time, but it was never created to include the African countries or certain countries of the global south. That was not their intention. It was not their intention for the human rights treaties to include us people.
The United Nations has been involved in various activities across Africa, including peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, and development initiatives. However, its presence has not been without controversy, and there have been several incidents that are considered atrocity or significant failures. Watch and pay attention, and I will share my thought later.
I do want to set the record straight on one thing. We've heard a few times the sentence, we gained our independence, we were given independence, but actually that's not true. We were always independent. We were independent nations, we were independent people, and we regained our independence. And I think that's a crucial difference because something was taken away from us and we took back what was always ours. So I urge everyone to not talk from the perspective of, oh, we got our independence in 1965 or they gave us our independence. No, they actively came to our countries, took our independence away, they enslaved us, they colonized us, and we took it back. Regarding the topic of neocolonialism, I have a bit of an issue with the neo. Neo is Latin for new. There's, for me, nothing new about it. It's true what Max said in the beginning. Slavery and colonialism go hand in hand. And yes, it's true, it was an economic structure to enrich oneself, but there's nothing neo about it. What happened 200-300 years ago is still happening today, right? If we think about the United Nations, a lot of people think about human rights. What I think about is the United Nations was created in San Francisco in 1945. If you think about how the world looked like in 1945, it was largely colonized, if not all. It was a small selective group of countries who created the UN, and it expanded over time, but it was never created to include the African countries or certain countries of the global south. That was not their intention. It was not their intention for the human rights treaties to include us people, right? So there is nothing neo about it. Same goes for institutions like the World Bank, IMF, even the European Union. And like you already said, they like our resources, but they don't like our people. And I think the war in Ukraine is a very good example of that, because what we saw is that when you're white, you get everything. When you're black, you don't get anything. I've been to those places. I've traveled to Ukraine, to the bordering countries, to help people of African descent. And what you saw is that all of a sudden, we didn't need conferences. We didn't need so many debates. We could adopt laws within a week, not even, to grant people asylum, money, housing, schooling, you name it. But when it came to people of African descent, we took the humanity out of them. We called them third country nationals. Third country nationals. You're not a number. You're not a person. You're not someone who's traumatized, who fled away from something, right? You are a third country national. You're not number one. You are not number two. You are not number three. And that is still going on today.
And maybe to specify so that everyone can follow the third country national you're referring to now are specifically people from the African continent who were in the Ukraine, and then the selection happening over there with people fleeing towards.
Yes and no. My personal work is only focusing on people of African descent, nothing more, nothing less. That's a deliberate choice that we made as an organization that I proudly stand for. The entire concept of third country nationals is, I would say, in a social sense, if you have a skin color that's not white, What we saw is that third country nationals also entail people from India, indeed African people. When the war in Ukraine started, what we saw, especially in the university areas which are more towards the Russian border, is that they would queue people up based on their skin color. So if you were, let's say, someone from Morocco and very light-skinned, you would place at front of the line. And if you're black, you would place at the end of the line. And that would determine the way how you would be evacuated, if at all. And at a certain point, they were like, we don't want those people over here. We don't want them. So let's call them not first-class citizens, not second-class citizens. Let's call them third country nationals. First country nationals generally means like you're from the country. Like I have a Dutch passport, so I'm officially a Dutch citizen. Second country national means that you have a passport from a European Union country, so you're a citizen of the European Union. Third country national generally means everything and anything outside of that, but in practice, it is something completely different. It's just a racist concept that takes the humanity out of them. The first one is colonial taxes. Today, there are 14 African countries who are required to pay with the French franc, which is absurd because in France, they pay with the euro. And without signing this agreement, they couldn't regain their independence. And then there is a second one, which is not only related to France, but also to Spain, to Portugal. The Netherlands had some part in it. And it's some kind of investment agreement. And it basically entails that, let's say you're in a given African country and you delve gold. And you think, I want to sell that gold in the market to have some money. The country that colonized you, so let's say this happens in Madagascar, the Madagascar company who delves the gold needs to mandatory talk to the Portuguese government, who is not on the continent, and offer them the gold and say, look, we've delved 100 kilos of gold and we want to sell it. If Portugal says we want to buy it, they buy it, they determine the rate. If Portugal at that point says, we don't want to buy it, but at the same time, we don't allow you to bring it to the market for others to buy it, they're not allowed to sell it. So I think those two also need to be mentioned because they're contributing heavily.
No, I think this is only three factors. So, if there's students here or people like, we need to, map all the different mechanics. And it sounds like Jan Pietersen Koen is still alive, like trying to monopolize a market. It sounds just like what they were fighting for at the time. Like, we decide who you sell to and why. So thank you for sharing and adding that this is a far from complete picture as well.
Of Bolivia, changing the constitution from a republic where the Catholic Church had absolute power to a country where the very few cultures that survived now have a saying. Obviously, there is a lot of problems there, but one thing that is very clear to me is that in all those 500 years of colonization, the colonization from the Spanish, the colonization has managed to create a genocide bigger than any other genocide we can remember in history. I would find it horrible if it would happen to you in Africa.
I'm sorry, I want to respond because I disagree with Max. I think the question that was posed is a valid one. I hate to break it to you, but we don't live in a utopia that everything is arranged and that everything is protected equally. Language is important. Culture is important. Religion is important. Practices is important. Music, the way how you dance, talk, eat, everything is important. And what we're not going to do over here is play the oppression Olympics, because that's kind of the feeling that I get right now. Yes, it's true that there is extreme poverty and we should tackle extreme poverty, but we cannot say, we're going to tackle this one first and we'll see along the way and we have maybe an interim period and see what we're going to do to protect X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
People all over the world have civil, political, and cultural rights. They have cultural rights for a reason, right? What we have seen with this enslavement of African people is that they took away everything. They took away your language, your religion, your names, your ceremonies, you name it. To say right now, okay, we're going to tackle poverty and we put our trust in a single leader who will protect everything in the United States of Africa. People need to wake up. That's not how it works. Why would you put everything on the line and then just hope that someone will protect that? No, it should be protected equally. And sure, it's true, there are languages that you can learn easy, Swahili, it's true. But should we focus on, it's a language that you can learn easily? No, it's not your language. If you want to learn that language, like English is not my native language, but I learned it. It was my choice. But I make the decision which language I want to learn. But my native language needs to be protected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think this is an important point, that we don't copy solutions that look European, right? So we have to decolonize our imagination, how unity and diversity, etc., can look like.
Yeah.
Max, you want to respond to this response?
Just shortly, the unity I'm talking about, I said it at the beginning. It has nothing to do with culture. It has nothing to do with, how do you call this, history. It has to do with the future. How can Africa play a role in the world? Because at this moment, you can protect any culture you want in Africa, but our voice doesn't mean anything to nobody. So this is my priority. How can we turn Africa in a powerhouse in this world? Because we have a lot to offer to the world. That's the point. So the political unity of Africa is strategic to the survival of African. Like I said, if we don't reach this level, then we will end up with this genocide we are all afraid of. With our beautiful culture, our beautiful languages, we will not survive. So that's my point. We will not survive if we continue like this, divided and not trying to become a power. That's what I wanted to ask.
All right. And we don't, just to make clear, and I like that you also express disagreement. We don't need to agree. We have different perspectives, but I want to leave it there for where we are now, also due to time. Maybe one final question. So there's one final question there, and then I want to add one question. We do one round that you can answer to this last question, and the question that I want to answer to it, what do you think are important reparatory steps as well that we should take from here relating to migration? Yes.
Hi, I'm going to take a little bit more than one question because I was waiting a long time and people were taking their turn, so I'm going to do the same. First, I want to quickly say something. I quickly want to say something about the question that was just asked. I feel it's a bit denigrating to see Pan-Africanism as a problem than as a solution, because I do feel that we shouldn't copy anything from Europe. But if you see like how Europe works together, they have different cultures and different languages, and it's never been a problem. So I don't think Pan-Africanism in that sense could be an issue. And then I want to go to something very differently. I think at the end of the presentation of Max, I think there was this suggestion to do a new way of trading and selling cacao or any other products for a share of the retail price. And I want to ask, like, if we do it that way, how then Africa becomes independent of this still European controlled market?
Yeah. That is very easy to answer. We are talking about sharing the revenues. So from that moment, nobody is controlling nobody. We are sharing the revenue. First, we need to understand Africa cannot go to industrialization right now. We don't have the capital for it. We don't have the infrastructure. And it's it's not an intelligent way to copy this linear industry. So the solution we have is a transitional solution. And from the moment, believe me, when we will impose to China, the United States, Europe, to share the benefit made at the end of the value chain, believe me, they will talk differently. Because then it's the Netherlands. There is they say, je moet iemand pakken als zijn portemonnee. When you get there, people change the way they talk. Because we are sharing it. And we cannot decide today, okay, we don't sell any raw material. That is when you will get war. So for the time being, it's a strategy to go like something like 10 years. We continue, but we change the rules. And in that time, we can install in Africa a clean industry which is better for the whole world. Today we are talking about energy transition, what they are doing on sea. While if you just use a piece of the Sahara Desert, you can produce solar energy for the whole world. So this is a bit what it's needed to understand.
But I have a question to you. Do you think African leaders of today, they know what is the African resources value and what is Africa value
They
itself?
don't know.
That's the problem, I think.
They don't know.
That is the problem.
They don't know.
You know, that's the problem.
Now we are doing a research with the Wageningen University to list all the shareholders and the cacao industry in the Netherlands. I was talking to someone from the Cocoa Board, that is the institution in Ghana who control cocoa. They didn't have any ideas about who is doing what with cacao when it's happened, when it's arrived in Amsterdam. They don't care about that. They send secret services to Europe to follow people like you and me, instead of following their money. So they don't have any idea about that. That's why now I'm happy Mika start talking like, I don't call these people leaders. If we solve this problem, we will become the legitimate leaders of Africa directly. So it's not only about economy, it's about how we are going to build Africa for the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think you also answered my question. No problem. In terms of what you think is most important to do. So to summarize, it's getting a shareholder of what goes out of Africa
Exactly.
as a simple solution, but you can apply it systematically not only to cacao, but other
To all raw materials.
and that can be reinvested
in cleaner
within
industry.
that context. So thank you for sharing that. Then I want to look to you for the rest. What do you want to say as final words towards the audience, what you think is most important to be done in relation to this subject?
I think that we should all be conscious that, however you want to name it, I don't believe in a refugee crisis. Immigration, asylum seekers, whatsoever, is linked to colonialism. There is a reparatory aspect attached to it. You know, like they came, they conquered, they exploited, they divided, they closed the borders, but they take the resources. There is a reason why people are leaving their countries. They're not doing it because they're bored or something. There's a reason behind it. And we all laugh, but they feel it. They truly feel it. Talk to a person who comes from there, and they will share their experience with you. And their stories, their realities are horrible. And at the same time, we need to be conscious how we, over here in the Netherlands, are contributing to it, right? We are all in our own way contributing to it. Use your privilege to empower others. Don't be a savior. We don't need that. We need allies.
Action.
Don't cherry pick who you want to help. Don't cherry pick who you want to advocate for. And having said that, I cannot stand here in front of you, talk about double standards like third country nationals or colonialism without asking you for your sympathy for the people of Palestine. It's not a complex issue. There's nothing complicated about it. It's apartheid, it's colonialism, it's genocide, it's persecution, it's collective punishment, and it's way more than that. I don't know how many of you have seen Nasser's performance at the TV show Khalid and Said. And there was a part where he said, we are used to defining people in numbers. 1,200 people are killed, 48 are wounded. But these are human beings. We cannot cherry pick which colonial aspect we condemn and which one we ignore. We cannot cherry pick who deserves our help and who doesn't. Just imagine that Palestine is Ukraine. Just imagine that. Would you react the same? So I urge you to stand in solidarity and use your privilege wisely, use it in a way to create justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe to add a little bit to what you said, and then I'll give you to also the final words, is that the Israeli government actually is connected. Like justice to Palestine is connected to justice to everywhere, because you saw, for instance, when the apartheid regime in South Africa was losing international...
PLO helped him.
Yeah, but also when South African apartheid regime was losing its face towards the international community and starting to get boycotted, Israel was one of the last powers to maintain and give arms support to the apartheid regime.
Yeah.
And Israel drew inspiration from the apartheid regime to build its own. So it's good to see the connections, that the freedom of one people is connected to the freedom of other people as well. So thank you for bringing that in.
The Rwandan genocide of 1994, the UN failed to prevent genocide in Rwanda, where approximately 800,000 people were killed in a span of 100 days. Despite warnings from peacekeepers on the ground, the UN did not take sufficient action to stop the violence, which has been widely criticized as a massive failure. Secondly, one of the failures of the UN is sexual exploitation and abuse. UN peacekeepers have been involved in numerous scandals across Africa, including in the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. They have been accused of sexual exploitation, abuse, and trafficking, further victimizing the very people they were supposed to protect. The UN has been accused of perpetuating a form of neocolonialism by imposing Western values, policies, and economic models that do not always align with local cultures or needs. This has led to criticism that the UN is more concerned with maintaining the status quo of powerful nations rather than genuinely helping African countries achieve self-determination and development. Some argue that the UN's extensive humanitarian aid program have created dependency in some African countries, stifling local economic development and self-sufficiency. This has led to situations where countries are unable to break free from cycle of poverty and crisis. Another issue is failure to address root causes. The UN has been criticized for focusing on short-term relief efforts rather than addressing the underlying causes of conflict and poverty in Africa. This approach has sometimes resulted in temporary fix rather than sustainable solutions. While the UN has made significant contributions to peace and development in Africa, its actions have all led to serious controversies and criticism. The failure in preventing atrocities like the Rwandan genocide, the involvement of peacekeepers in abuses, and the impositions of external values have all contributed to the perception that the UN has, at times, done more harm than good in certain parts of Africa. These issues highlight the need for reform and greater accountability within the organization. Thank you for watching. Do not forget to like and share your thoughts in the comment box below. Until next time, cheers and have a good one.